Hi, everybody. I'll try to speak over the people in the back. I've got to say thanks to the conference organizers, Aubrey and Martin and the team. I've noticed that the Irish hospitality is a very real thing, and that the Irish, you really know how to party. It was kind of surreal last night seeing everybody on the dance floor, you know, some of my idols in the longevity space, Aubrey de Grey, Mike West, Brian Kennedy, busting a move, getting jiggy with it. And I've got to say, guys, if the whole longevity thing doesn't work out, you may have a career as a backup dancer for Beyonce. Just kidding, you're not that good. Don't quit your day jobs. All right, so I'm going to talk to you guys about this field called long bio. This is a new term for the longevity biotech field. It saves us time, but it also, by calling it a very specific thing, a very discrete idea, long bio, it makes longevity a meme in the minds of researchers and investors, and kind of in the same way that synthetic biology is known as synbio. Okay, so the overview of the presentation, I'll talk a bit about my own background, Healthspan Capital, an overview of the biopharma machine, long bio as an investment theme, a snapshot of some of the cast and characters, DSci, decentralized science, and the legit long bio checklist, a new tool we can collaboratively use, and some case studies of some companies that I've helped launch, Immune Age Pharma and Samsara Therapeutics. So my own background, who am I? I look myself in the mirror every day and ask this question. But for the purpose of this talk, like many of you, I'm a biomedical scientist by training, studied molecular neuroscience of brain aging and biotech business management, did part of a PhD at Oxford on the biochemistry of aging, and was affiliated with a bunch of different research institutions, including I was funded by Aubrey Sen's Foundation when I worked at the Buck Institute. I transitioned into the biotech space in venture capital at Apollo Health Ventures, helping to launch this organization. And it has become one of the largest it is the largest aging-focused venture fund in the world with $200 million under management. I launched a company called Samsara Therapeutics, which is one of the larger autophagy-focused drug discovery platform companies in the UK. And then I co-founded a company called Cambrian Biopharma, which is today one of the larger aging-focused companies. It's a multi-asset DISCO, distributed drug discovery company based in New York. We raised $160 million, and we have about 20 assets in the pipeline. And then I launched a new fund called Healthspan Capital, as well as a new company, Immune Age Pharma, and I'll talk about both of those in just a second. I also advise a whole lot of other organizations in the space. I'll talk about VitaDAO in particular, but you guys should check out the rest of these organizations as well. So Healthspan Capital, we invest in longevity biotech and regenerative medicine. This is our team. We started about a year ago, but we've got great people around the table, and they have a lot of experience across leading academic research institutions, big pharma, biotech, et cetera. These are some of the companies that we're proudly investors in. You'll recognize a bunch. If you're a long bio founder, please get in touch. We're often the earliest capital in, or at least the earliest institutional capital. Healthspan, we have a diversified portfolio, so we're not like Apollo in that we're not building companies, but we're placing a lot of bets on the table across a larger portfolio. My colleagues are very well connected in the space, and we provide a lot of hands-on support at the board level for the companies in which we invest. You guys all know about this, Altos and Calico, Retro as well. There's a lot of capital and a lot of sophisticated minds coming into this space now. So I'll skip through a lot of these slides just in the interest of time, but they're available if you're interested. One of my partners at Healthspan Capital is Nathan Cheng, the invincible Nathan Cheng, and he runs longevityList.com. And you can see a list of all of the companies and investors and even job postings in this space. So definitely do check that out. But you notice that there's an exponential increase in the number of companies at least referring to themselves as long bio companies, but we'll figure out how to clearly define that later. Here's a snapshot of Longevity List with the information on some companies. Also subscribe to his newsletter, which is the most subscribed newsletter in the space, Longevity Market Cap newsletter. This I call my social proof slide, so an appeal to ethos, some of the smart money and prominent people getting into the space. But of course, this list is growing by the day. Also, this hasn't been announced, but here's a sneak peek. We're partnering with Leaf to help them with their with the companies in their ecosystem. All right, so an overview of the machinations of the biopharma system. So this I call a wiring diagram of the biomedical economy. So we can zoom in. It all starts with the public, all of us. We pay taxes to the NIH or the MRC. That money flows into universities. Biotech companies come out the other end. And then we also, through our investment portfolios or pension funds, have risk capital that goes into the public markets and private markets, also into venture funds and biotech startups. Ultimately, these companies are acquired by big pharma. Both organizations, biotechs and big pharmas, rely heavily on CROs, contract research organizations. They provide the data to regulators, payers decide whether to reimburse, and then healthcare providers decide to prescribe or not. So a bit of history. Big pharma is historically asleep at the wheel. According to Jürgen Drews, the head of R&D at Roche, the biotech industry is increasingly taking up what the pharmaceutical industry is neglecting, carrying out future-directed research, creating the conditions for the discovery of new classes of medicines that attack more directly the root causes of disease. That sounds like geroscience to me. And then the Nobel laureate David Baltimore said, regarding biotech in the 90s, pharma was asleep at the wheel, unable to understand the profound opportunities provided by molecular biology and unable to take advantage of them. To their credit, pharma this time around is much quicker on the uptake with long bio. So there's some very bad news in the pharmaceutical industry that many of you are probably aware of, that their own internal R&D pipelines are very inefficient. And so they're actually burning investors' capital on their internal R&D. And to their credit, they're outsourcing a lot of that work. There's some good news, and this data comes from Andrew Lowe's group at MIT, where big pharma is decentralizing their R&D to biotech. So in the year 2000, the top-selling drugs, of them, only 13% originated in biotech. The rest were from internal R&D pipelines. But if you fast forward to 2018, it's a sea of blue. The blue lines there are drugs of the best-selling drugs that originated in academic spin-outs and biotech. But the problem is there's a big bottleneck in launching new companies because we don't have the talent or the risk capital to get through that valley of death. Company formation is always the hardest part. And then there's some super good news also coming from Andrew Lowe's group, showing that across clinical trial stages from phase 1 to approval, the success rate has about tripled or quadrupled in the last 3 or 4 years. And it's well known that startups are more efficient than big pharma at getting new drugs approved by a factor of about 8. So I want to talk about a new business structure called a DISCO, a distributed drug discovery company, showing that biopharma business models can be groovy. So it was previously called a lot of things, but we coined this term when we launched Cambrian a couple of years ago, but there are a bunch of other companies in the space, so I'd refer you to this McKinsey article about the model. So there are a bunch of companies in the longevity space with this model, so it's basically a topco and then subsidiary-based model. But we didn't invent it. There are other companies in the space like Bridge Bio which have this. And then in the UK, you guys are very enlightened. You have venture capital trusts, which are publicly listed tax-privileged entities. So the basic structure of the DISCO, you have a topco, which deals with fundraising. It lowers your cost of capital. You can IPO that entity. But then you have central services that are shared across all of your portfolio, from medchem, pharm tox, clinical regulatory, et cetera, so that not every new company needs to reinvent the wheel every time. And then you can just aggregate a bunch of these snacks, these single novel asset companies, and there's synergy to doing that. So preaching to the choir here, geroscience is a new paradigm for drug discovery. A bit of history, the antibiotics revolution was actually not expected by the contemporaries of the day. So most physicians and scientists thought it would be crazy to have a silver bullet or a magic bullet a pill you could take that would deal with infectious disease, which at the time was the leading cause of death by far. But lo and behold, it came about. One example is penicillin at my college at Oxford, Lincoln College. Howard Florey basically found the article by Alexander Fleming 10 years later and ran the clinical trials to get penicillin approved in time for World War II, in which he saved tens of millions of lives. So I think something similar is happening in geroscience. When there are those first clinical proofs of principle that you can extend healthy lifespan and you can treat multiple age-related diseases with the same drug, there will be a medical revolution. So you guys know the biology. We'll basically just skip this and say that this is probably an incomplete list. There's still work to be done on the hallmarks of aging, or the 7 deadly sins, which are perfectly complete in their Platonic form. So there are many interventions that extend healthy lifespan, genetic mostly, but some pharmacological. And a lot of what our job is just translating the genetic results into drugs, which is mostly an engineering problem. Here are some of the quantum of increases. I'll foreshadow a bit and mention heterochronic bone marrow transplant as probably being an underrated approach, as well as repair of leaky gut, gut barrier permeability. So some of the players in this space, some of the earliest investors, Healthspan, Apollo, Cambrian, are some that I have helped launch. These are the ones that I'm affiliated with, but there are many excellent players in this space and many more coming into the space. Here are some of the companies in the area. This is, of course, an incomplete list. Some of them are publicly listed. So definitely check out longevitylist.com to see a more complete list. How do we do investor diligence? So a lot of you guys have companies or you're academics contemplating spinning out a company. This could be helpful for you. So this is sort of the general process that we use. I'll get into each of these points in a minute, but one of the things academics don't do very well is think about their intellectual property strategy. And basically what you should aim to do is have a composition of matter patent, a real physical thing, a product, like a semi-synthetic molecule, for example, that you can get composition of matter patent on. Here's some of the broad categories that we use to diligence companies. One of the key defining characteristics of a long bio company is that you must have some healthy lifespan extension in some species. I think that goes without saying, but actually a lot of companies out there position themselves as longevity companies, but in fact they do not have healthy lifespan extension data, and you guys know how to read lifespan curves. So this is where we really look to spin out companies, journals, conferences, tech transfer offices, grant databases, inbound deal flow, patent databases. What I've really been surprised by is that there's a lot sitting on the shelf in academia. There are a lot of great assets that no one is doing anything with. A friend of mine is a BD person at Pfizer, and she said that there were only 12 people in all of Pfizer, one of the biggest pharmas in all of North America, looking for assets, doing search and evaluation, interacting with universities. So there's a lot of opportunity. These are some of the resources that I really like, both in the geroscience space and the biotech space broadly. This is an example of a structured process that we use to evaluate companies or assets on multiple parameters. One example that's really important that pharmacologists and med chemists think about, but not a lot of basic biologists, is a concept called the therapeutic index. So it's the ratio between the effective dose and the toxic dose. We also have this checklist that we can share with you guys when you're thinking about how to spin out a company or if you yourselves are investing in companies. IP diligence is a little beyond the scope, but long story short, where there's a will, there's a way. Even if you don't think it's possible to get IP, usually there is a way. So if the data really justify it, if it's the best result you've ever seen, there is usually a way to get IP one way or the other. One way you can value assets is a risk-adjusted net present value model. We won't get into that, but if you're curious, come talk to me later. This is what an RNPV model looks like. You need to have a budget and a Gantt chart to really be ready to raise capital. All right, so getting into DeSci. This could revolutionize the way we fund research, and eventually it could render obsolete the entire academic enterprise for the better. So you guys have heard about Web3. What is it? It's the internet of money. So we always transact in all kinds of things, a lot of information online, but we haven't really put money in the exchange of value natively on the internet, but that's happened. So what is DeSci? My definition, DeSci is a new paradigm to discover, disseminate, fund, and execute scientific research without relying on governments, big corporations, and centralized organizations. The on-chain IP resulting from this research can be fractionalized and liquidly traded in a manner more transparent than the current IP market structure. You can finance companies and labs on-chain via DAOs. And the decentralized approach mitigates the enforcement of scientific dogma and perverse incentives in both industry and academia, which have failed in their obligations to public health and scientific progress. If you want to know more, go on the Ethereum Foundation website, and they have a page on DeSci. So this is a snapshot of some of the companies in the DeSci space. This is a little out of date because every day there are more coming into the space, and I'll do a case study on VitaDAO in a minute. Okay, so VitaDAO, it's one of the first DAOs funding decentralized biomedical research. We have support by famous people, Bob Nelson from Arch Ventures, one of the biggest venture funds, Balaji, former CTO of Coinbase, Vitalik, inventor of Ethereum, a great supporter of the field. I actually first met Vitalik a couple years ago at a Berlin SENS conference. So we've deployed a bunch of money into projects, and we have a ton in the pipeline. We have several thousand members who are really helping us with this sourcing engine all over the world, looking in every nook and cranny for interesting assets, and we just raised more capital. Recently, we had $500,000 from Pfizer Ventures come in, quite surprisingly, and we were covered in Nature Biotech, and also Balaji, who I just mentioned, who's I think one of the brightest minds in the crypto space, a space in which there are many bright minds, has also invested. That hasn't been announced yet. We create things called IP NFTs, so you've heard of NFTs. We should put all assets on the blockchain eventually, and patents and intellectual property are no different. Here's an example of one of them. We funded a bunch of different entities. You guys know some of these groups already. Some more that we've funded as well. You can go on our website to find out more, including Sense Foundation, CAR NK Cell Project, and Vera Gorbanova's lab, who I'll tell you about in a sec. So our first spin out from VitaDAO. VitaDAO is only a year old, but I think we're making rapid progress. We just spun out our first company called Matrix Bio from the lab of Vera Gorbanova, who is one of my absolute favorite geroscientists. And basically, she works on many things, comparative longevity, and found that naked mole rats, one of the reasons why they don't get cancer is because they have special extracellular matrix component, very high molecular weight hyaluronic acid, and that prevents tumor metastasis. So she found a small molecule that actually inhibits an enzyme that degrades hyaluronic acid, and we're now doing a screen to find others and further validate that hit compound that she's found. And she published some of this work in Nature a couple years ago, finding lifespan extension, reduced cancer incidence when you engineer normal rodents to have the naked mole rat secret sauce. So we put in 300K, we'll probably put in about 500K in the near future to do a high throughput screen at Washington University. So the legit long bio typology, this I think is an important way for us as a field to have some objective criteria for what constitutes a really attractive long bio company or asset or data set. Why is this self-regulation, quality control step so important? Well, as we get into a bubblicious period in long bio, I think there will be a stock market bubble, and when that happens, a lot of clout chasers and carpetbaggers, sort of not very legit people get into the field because there's a lot of money there. And so we need a rigorous way to say this is a true long bio company that everyone should be excited about. So it's not a matter of opinion. And I think the snowball has started rolling. The train has left the station with long bio, but there could be some kind of crisis that actually sets us back for a long time. Exhibit A is Theranos, held back the liquid diagnostics field. Exhibit B is lentiviral gene therapy, which held back gene therapy for a decade. Exhibit C is the amyloid hypothesis, finally seems to be passing on, that held back Alzheimer's for quite a long time, and we wasted billions of dollars. Check out this article by Stat News about the Alzheimer's cabal that swept under the rug all of the negative data that undercut the amyloid hypothesis. And you can check out a talk I gave on YouTube about that as well. So what is the long bio typology? This is a first draft. We're going to put it on our website. We'd love everybody to give your feedback and input and sort of open source it as a living document. So type 1, these are companies that extend wild-type mouse healthy lifespan by greater than 10%, even when given to mice older than 12 months of age. Rapamycin is an example of this. This is very rare and valuable data. Type 2, 10% or more, but given when they're younger than 12 months, like astaxanthin or SGLT2 inhibitors. Type 3, less than 10%, like metformin, which I think is a little overrated, metformin is, acarbose estradiol. Lifespan results should be reproduced by at least 3 independent labs and/or the NIA ITP program. Type 4, and most long bio companies will be in this category. The MOA has been shown genetically or pharmacologically to extend lifespan greater than 10% wild-type rodents, but not pharmacologically with a new drug-like compound. Okay, and then type 5, the MOA is less than 10% healthy lifespan extension like Yamanaka reprogramming, which is, I think, a little overhyped, anti-inflammaging. Type R, regenerative medicine. And then for any drug to be a long biomedicine, it has to have multi-morbidity reduction potential, coined by my former co-founder, James Pyer, and have the potential to be a preventative medicine that enhances resilience before the disease becomes severe. A drug that can only treat lung fibrosis, for example, is not, but a drug that can be label expanded to many other indications and is safe enough to be a prophylactic does count. So a shout out to Cambrian. This is a company I co-founded a couple of years ago, and we're hiring in New York and globally. We raised $160 million since 2020. We've got 20 assets in the pipeline, a team of 100 distributed all over the world, and we just out-licensed the rapamycin analogs program from Novartis with Joan Manick. By the way, that's unrelated to the Restor Bio asset. It's totally different. A quick overview of my latest company, ImmuneAge Pharma. So we're the first drug discovery platform company for immune system rejuvenation. To my great surprise, we all know how important immune function is in aging. Nobody has ever set out to do a systematic drug discovery effort to find those molecules that rejuvenate the immune system ex vivo and in vivo. This is our team so far. We're less than a year old. We have 100 years of combined drug discovery experience, some leaders in immune aging. I have launched 3 semi-successful long bio companies, valued it with 600 million equity value in under 4 years, so that's sort of an investor pitch. And these are some of the affiliations that our team has. So I'm really lucky to have this rock star team already so early in the company. These are some of the institutions that we're partnered with. So you guys know one of the hallmarks of aging is stem cell exhaustion. The hematopoietic stem cells are really critical to the function of the entire immune system, so we're starting there. If you transplant young to old bone marrow, it actually extends mouse lifespan. Multiple groups have shown this. Our platform is based on 2 aspects. One, the stem supply platform. So for the first time ever, one of our collaborators at Oxford has shown that he can get 1,000-fold expansion of stem cells, HSCs, while maintaining their stemness, which is about a factor of 100 greater than what anyone has achieved before, which could revolutionize the bone marrow transplant space. But we use this technology to do high-throughput drug screening on aged human HSCs. And we've already found some. We do medchem, and we test it in animal models of disease. So some of our data I don't have time to get into, but basically we found a molecule that rejuvenates the HSCs ex vivo, and the incubated cells in our drug outperform even young HSCs when transplanted. There are many indications we can go for. Long-term, we want to do a bone marrow transplant immune system reboot. So you go in for an outpatient procedure. We take your HSCs, put them in a dish, treat them with rejuvenating factors, and away you go. So it's a gentle replacement of your existing immune system, kind of like the ship of Theseus, where you slowly replace one piece of wood at a time. When do you have a new ship? When do you have a new immune system? So our mission is to rejuvenate the immune system by any means necessary. We've seen in immune oncology this revolution by targeting the T and NK cells, but what if we go a step above that? Because by the time you get cancer, your immune cells have already failed to work. So what if we could intervene above that? Formatting is messed up here, but basically pitch for Samsara Therapeutics in the UK if you guys want a job there. We raised 23 million in Oxford, UK. We're working on autophagy enhancement. We have this platform to find novel autophagy enhancers. We've got a rock star team of people at Apollo and people with long decades of experience in drug discovery and pharma. We've got excellent scientists there in Oxford and board, started with Guido Kromer. We have a bunch of assets in the pipeline, and we're about 1 year away from the clinic with our first drug. And then finally, the shout out for the Longevity Prize. If you guys are scientists, you can basically write an essay and get free money for going through the literature and finding undervalued ideas in the geroscience field. So for example, Irina Conboy did this years ago with heterochronic parabiosis. About a century ago, people were doing this, but she revived it at Stanford a little while ago, and now it's one of the hottest techniques in geroscience. So with that, thank you guys very much for listening, and look forward to talking to you at lunch. Cheers.